Alright, time for overdrivetphysics.com video presentation. Unfortunately, it's Brozo day. Oh, jeez. A few days ago he posted some crap videos, and so now I have to go through the trouble of, responding, I suppose. It's not really worthy of a response because he does this kind of crap in his videos. He finds whatever at his little uh, whatever welfare whore community. He finds the girl most likely to have one too many. Uh, Whatever. He went to the store and got her some slut cream as a favor, and so she decided to say, okay, go ahead, take some pictures. Must be so, I mean, women must really get off on that, when they make old geezers hot. This must be such a thrill. Anyway, it's just so fucking tacky, playing hot legs. She just, they're kind of just barely shaped like a leg, frankly. Oh, God. Anyway, just, it's so tacky. I mean, this is a guy thinking he's doing real science here, and he's on the cutting edge. I mean, Newton would vomit, It's just, this is so bad. I'm having a hard time not, It's just, it's almost, and the videos are almost impossible to watch. The things he thinks are important and the things he emphasizes and all this bold text, put everything in all caps. It's just so ridiculous. So anyway, this is a video that is whatever a month and a half late. So a month and a half ago, he said, I redid the experiment. It came out just right. Blah 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 blah. And the irony is, this is over. His other experiment, the flaw he claims, it was an angular momentum flaw. And what does he do? He uses angular momentum to basically, fuck the experiment. Do it so wrong and in such an obvious way. So, the experiment is so simple, and yet it can't get done right. All right. Now, I suggested that you use pendulums because then we can eliminate this whole ground problem. So you just kind of hang, the 5 mass out here, the half mass, and the 10 mass here, and you're going to test these two things. Okay, with a lever. So it's not really twice the distance, but you get the idea. This is 2 distances. This is 1 distance from the fulcrum. You have a constant. The same amount of energy goes in. And obviously, the rational prediction of conservation of momentum is this one leaves with 2x the speed of this one. So everything works out. Momentum works. Newton would understand it works this way. Anyway, so he's trying to prove that it doesn't. It conserves whatever kinetic energy is. All right, so the first time he did the experiment with it, he did a cut down cue ball thing, kind of clever. He was pushing them on a glass surface, kind of smooth, really almost reasonable. And of course, he did get a result that was pretty damn close to, it was. This was 19 and this was 11. So pretty close to 2-to-1 relationship. Now he claims this one rolled a little bit and that consumed all of the extra. That's the cause of the differential in the speed. This one being so much slower is because it had some angular momentum where this one just skidded across the surface. And so that was his excuse. Now, if you look at the video, this is a very slight amount of rolling. It's not rolling proportional to the distance. So it is skidding and rolling. But regardless, it seems like a minor defect. And you're not going to get to 1.4 with it anyway. But anyway, so that was his excuse, and so he was going to correct for that. And so how does he correct for it? Well, he makes the objects. I mean, it's like such a cliche mistake. I mean, it's so obviously a mistake. So the half mass object is a cylinder like this, and it's hollow. And then the 2 mass object is the same size cylinder, except it's solid all the way through. So it's solid all the way through. So the problem with this is these two things, if you put them on a track, this one will go a lot slower because all of the mass has to move the faster velocity. And in this one, it will move much faster, it'll roll much faster because it doesn't have to move the interior mass at the same velocity per roll. So it has less energy stored in its spin, you could argue. So this one will have a very low energy per spin, and this one will have a much higher energy per spin into spin. And so this one will end up going slower than it should. So he says he got these results of like 40 and 58 or something like that, claiming that this is going only 1.4 as fast. And obviously, if you just account for the angular momentum this time, you can understand that this number is going to go up rather dramatically, frankly. It's a significant difference in the speed that these two things would roll at. So if I made the same weighted object hollow and then I filled it, I'll get very different roll rates. So in the context of all this conversation about all these defects, this is a glaring defect, and I would argue that's probably why he probably figured that out, and that's why he didn't post the video for a month and a half, is because he wasn't too confident it was going to be unobservable, the cheat he's applying, the perversion, the distortion. You can't see those numbers, sorry about that, but minor defect in my opinion. So I'm not going to play the video because it's just all, he lies throughout the whole video about the history, about everything. He's such a pathetically sick, horrible, disgustingly dishonest human being. So I can play some. I'll just push you through some of it. It's just, like all his videos, it's just, especially this intro is just so obnoxious. Who is interested in this? Yeah, way too loud too. Let's just point out. I mean, because he lives in his 1970s youth or something. He thinks everybody relates to the, this going back. Remember berries or whatever. Member berries. Instead of taking the actual video, oh look, that's so cool. Fuck off. Yeah, whatever. Just disgusting. Anyway, so then he writes bullshit like this. Doubters, watch the parts Gary won't show uninterrupted. What does uninterrupted mean? You mean nobody's allowed to say anything to you, counter anything you say? They're not allowed to do that, and somehow the interruptions are a problem. So let's understand, Brozo he plays 40-second, 30-second clips of mine. He doesn't interrupt me. He quote mines my videos, okay? He doesn't let me say my piece. He doesn't play the part where I'm, explaining. He just tries to take little tiny clips of it and make it out of context and distort it. So it's just such a bizarre accusation from this piece of shit. Oh, God, he's such a slimy, horrible person. Anyway, so he's got these two cylinders. You can see this one is hollow, the one mass, completely hollow, and this one's completely filled. So, two fucking silly, look, it's full of some other kind of metal thing. Too stupid. All right, not even close to a fair experiment. And that's all you can say, right? But it's no point. This isn't going to show anything. So he takes the problem, a slight problem of angular momentum in the other video, and he goes to an extreme on the other side of now really making it a problem. So to create his distortion, to do this bullshit of, I'm going to do the experiment some shitty, stupid, moronic way to force the results to come out the way I want them to, and your job is to catch me. Okay, well, I caught you, fuckhead. I predicted it from the very beginning. So if you go back to a month and a half ago, I predicted that his new experiment will have some sort of monstrous, obvious cheat in it. And there it is, and he's posted it anyway. So it's all just doing his little frame rates, fine. This wasn't the issue in any of these videos. Look, I got my 1.4 result. Okay, so and him calculating an error rate is almost hilarious. So just complete bullshit. So he has to invent facts. So where did I invent the fact that angular momentum changes how fast things move? Of course it does. If something has to create rotational energy, that rotational energy has to come out of the linear momentum, the capacity of the object to move distance. That's the only place the angular momentum has to come from, is that energy. So the more energy stuck in the angular momentum proportional to the mass, the more hollow it is, the harder it is, the more of its energy will be caught up in angular momentum, a higher percentage. So those are the facts he's evading. Those are the facts he's ignoring. Frankly, those are facts I think he's perfectly aware of, and he just couldn't care less. And so he does all this close-up of his shitty materials. I don't even know what this is made out of, the lever itself. I don't know why the stop is this preposterously big thing, but all that shit doesn't make much difference. So it's good he shows a couple of clips of, well, I mean, they're not even clips, right? He's just taking little clips out of the videos to try to show us something, but he doesn't detail anything like his release system or anything else. And then he goes back and shows video from these frickin' first experiments he did with rolled up quarters or something, that had all kinds of issues, hitting versus pushing, who knows, and also they pretty much didn't prove his theory, so I understand. So, just bullshit to go back, playing that game like he's done something else that was worthy of anyone's consideration. I don't know what that is. I don't remember. I can't play his videos. He's just too ugly, obnoxious, disgusting, grotesque. Ugh.
Experiment, do you? So you've got to be fair and judge both experiments fair.
Oh, this whole fairness thing, you're so preposterously unfair to these principles and truths. So instead of debunking Professor Lewin, who would say you have to conserve momentum, so in all these experiments they're claiming kinetic energy is conserved. So levers, springs, hydraulics, none of them conserve momentum by their theory. I don't think conventional physics believes that, but that's what their theory is. That's what they're claiming.
Fairly. And mine was a far more accurate experiment. If you dispute that, then you're being dishonest. But
no, I'm not being dishonest about it. Well, this is 2 years ago, so he's defending something 2 years ago? Full explanation of what? Oh, what a joke. I guess we better play that part. This ought to be funny.
The pontificating you've been doing and slandering that you've been.
Right. Sure. There's no slander in your crappy rhetoric and in your verbiage. Of course there is. You liar. You've lied about all kinds of things. I say I didn't have internet for 10 days. You make up some fake CIA conspiracy story or something, some kind of fake narrative and say you have some evidence for it. You have zero evidence for it. You just make up a fake story. So I'm going to make up fake stories about you, you fucking weirdo. What's with the kids' toys in the house? What do you do with that? What's that backstory of that? Why don't you give us a full explanation of why you have kiddie toys in your fucking house?
Doing of good people. Fuck off. So now I'm pointing to the one mass there, 18 inches from the fulcrum. And there's the 2 mass, 9 inches from the...
All this, who the fuck would bother with all this crap he puts on top of everything? I mean, it's just amazingly stupid. And it's so fucking redundant. He leaves the same fucking thing on the screen.
fulcrum. Now I'm pointing to the frame counter and also the start and end point again.
Oh, really not interested. Okay, so let's get to this full explanation crap.
Is where it's launching these 2 particular objects at these particular places on the lever at the same time. When it's launching them singly, it launches them at different velocities.
Yeah, this is duh. So this is exactly, if I never said any different. So when you have them both on the lever, you can't fix the fact that the lever is stiff. So this one has to go twice as fast as this one. Now, the total momentum is the subject, so there's a total amount of momentum the spring gives, and so you could calculate that and divide it and figure out what your expectation would be when there's only one mass on the lever. It still has to be the same momentum. So if I have 2 objects on, I just count the total weight, and I say what's my total velocities per those weights, and add those 2 numbers, and I have a total amount of momentum the spring produces. Well, I'm going to have the same momentum when I put one object on. No matter where I put it, I'm going to get the same momentum. But you have to conserve the momentum, because springs hold force. It's going to apply the same force, whether the force is fast and thin, not long, or durable, slow but durable, keeps pushing. And that's basically the torque, and that's basically all that there's going to be, is that you have force into the spring, the force comes out, and the force is really just momentum. As Newton said, force equals momentum, and weight equals momentum, and that's all you have here is a pressure. Well, anyway, so it doesn't matter. The 5 mass has to conserve the momentum. The 10 mass here has to conserve the momentum. Both of them on the lever at the same time has to be the same amount of momentum. Okay, so there you certainly didn't proven that to be inaccurate. And then you have to calculate, because these are rolling objects, you have to recognize that part of the energy is in the spinning of the objects. If they flew off a cliff, they would be still spinning. Okay, and the spin is energy. So, anyway, but that was already talked about, that's already known. So there's no information in the fact that obviously there's going to be a different speed for the 5 mass when the 10 mass is here and when the 10 mass isn't here. When there's 15 pounds, let's say, on the lever, it's going to be a little different than when there's only 5. Duh.
And that's the whole point of this experiment, Gary.
No, that's not the point of it. The point is you're saying there's no conservation of momentum, okay? A very standard kind of rule of physics. I can't say it's essentially one of Newton's laws, but frankly, the second law is, frankly, the momentum is energy law. Force equals momentum law.
Okay. And because the masses have a 2-to-1 relationship, their velocities end up having a square root of 2 relationship.
For no rational reason. Why would that make any sense to anybody? Why would there be 4 times the energy in one? Why? Why would I think so? Why would there be a square root relationship? Why would there be any such notion? Why wouldn't the momentum be conserved?
When launched independently by the spring, because it gives the half mass
it gives the half mass actually less momentum. So somehow the momentum is destroyed. Somehow it's harder. They're saying it's harder to push lighter things. They're saying if I did give you a bowling ball, I gave you a 16-pound ball, they're basically saying you can only throw with the same energy the 8-pound ball 1.4 as fast, losing 0.6.
Same amount of energy as it gives to the 2 mass, but it...
So more bullshit. Okay, so we can't really use this word energy unless you qualify it, so you really should say kinetic energy, and I should say momentum energy. But there's no agreement on what an energy is.
Can't make it go the same speed because That would be breaking the laws of conservation of energy, wouldn't
All
it?
right, so, I'm just going to say it again. So they won't take this argument to physics. I mean, Professor Lewin's pretty certain you have to conserve the momentum. Nature can't finagle momentum. You're finagling momentum, okay? You're wiping it out. You've destroyed momentum. All right, it's gone. It's disappeared. The spring doesn't produce any. I mean, it's just bullshit. You use momentum to compress the spring. You know how much momentum compresses the spring. So why this story that somehow you don't understand how springs are compressed? Yeah, we know exactly what they're compressed by. Weight, which is just pressure, which is just momentum. Momentum compresses springs. So, I mean, to lie that you have any corroborating evidence or that this is a standard physics theory of, it's just such a lie. You have no evidence it takes 4 times the fuel to go twice as fast. We can just go through all the things you don't have any proof of. You have nothing corroborating your theory.
That's why it goes slower than you think it does. It only goes 1.4 square root of 2, Gary. But
I keep saying it as if I don't know what the arguments are. Yeah, I'm saying that's fucking impossible. You can't destroy the momentum. Nature can't finagle momentum. You can't just make it disappear. You have to explain where it went. It has less momentum. The force didn't get into the object. You have to explain why the force didn't get in the object. What's your fucking theory? You destroyed the momentum. Well, where is it?
they still work out as having exactly the same kinetic energy as each other.
Yes, right. And so did the other cheater physicist. Okay, he did a stupid experiment. He had same spring, and he's shooting objects. The heavier the object, apparently more energy goes into the objects. No explanation how that's possible. You really think that's possible? I'm just sitting here saying, well, what's obvious is you don't understand. Well, you do. What's obvious is you're just a cheater. You just do experiments till they come out the way you want them, and they have some stupid moronic flaw. And again, you're just sitting here saying, let's see if you can find the flaw. That's it. Do the experiment enough different ways, enough perversions, and you'll finally get it to come out the way you want it. That's the one you'll publish. Okay, and you'll keep all the rest hidden.
When you apply the kinetic energy formula, if you had 3-to-1 ratio masses, 3 times the distance away from the fulcrum.
Yes, it's supposed to be an even more grotesque difference. So it's even harder to push the even lighter object. Oh, they're so hard to push.
The lightest one would go square root of 3.
So go ahead and prove this, okay, by showing us how it works, okay? That if I put a 10 mass going 5 into a lever on one side and I have the 5 mass on this side, show that it works both ways. That we lose momentum both ways, because guns don't work this way. Guns aren't doing 1.4, quite kind of obviously. I mean, I would argue the momentum's being conserved. You're saying it's not, okay? I'm saying that there's no way you can do that experiment and sit there and claim it's doing a 1.4 thing. It seems like the bullet's really easy to push much faster. It goes much faster really easy.
Times the speed of the heavier one. In other words, 1.732 times. But they still work out as having exactly the same kinetic.
So again, I'm just pointing out exactly the same kinetic energy, and you destroyed the momentum. And you did it through an obvious, hollow object versus solid object, which is one of the rules you're not supposed to break in terms of doing the experiment. So he would have been better off. I mean, you can do this experiment with just 2. You could just double things. You could have a ball bearing on one side, and you could have 2 ball bearings to represent the double mass. So he could have put 2 ball bearings, 1 unit of distance, and then he could have put 1 ball bearing 2 units of distance and done the experiment. And then he would have eliminated the angular rotation problem, because they all would have the same density, and they would all have the same, they would all accrue angular momentum at the same rate. So lots of ways he could have fixed the experiment, but he's not interested in getting those answers. So the correct answer. He's just interested in distorting and perverting the experiment just enough to get his answer, the one he wants to get.
Energy as each other when you apply the kinetic energy formula. If it was 4-to-1 ratio masses, 4 times the distance.
This is just complete. See, this is why it's unwatchable. Yeah, this has only been gone over 4,000 times. I mean, I did that with my lever, and it oscillates perfectly. Momentum conserved. No evidence of your kinetic energy anywhere in the oscillation. And I explained how, well, why don't you explain how an oscillator works? Why don't you explain that an oscillator doesn't have to have all the energy go one way and all the energy go the other way, and then the energy just keeps flip-flopping? Explain how that's not the nature of all oscillators. So you'd have to be able to explain how there could possibly be twice as much energy on this side as there is this side of a perfect oscillator. And of course, that would be a stupid thing to try to do.
Distance away from the fulcrum. This quarter weight one would go square root of 4 times the speed of the 4 times heavy one. In other words, 2 times. But they still work out as having exactly the same kinetic energy.
So again, he's saying kinetic energy is conserved and momentum is destroyed. So you can make free momentum, you can destroy momentum. So it's exactly the opposite of what Professor Lewin said. And he's not taking this argument to Professor Lewin and saying, see, I proved your theory wrong. I've proved conventional physics wrong. There is no obligation to conserve momentum.
As each other when you apply the kinetic energy formula. In other words, you've got to quarter the weight, quarter the mass.
So it's just more bullshit. So again, you could redo the experiment and you could just use some other impact force besides a spring, right? You could just do this in gravity. You could drop an object from the same certain height, and it's going to have a certain impact. And so you could control the force that way, the force in. And you know exactly that that's a momentum. It's just going to be an object with a mass and a velocity. It's a known weight. Okay. And so he could replace the spring with some other force that we know is momentum. So he could, and he's, what's the reasoning? He's going to say that that object doesn't have to conserve, that momentum doesn't have to be conserved. I mean, it's just such bullshit.
To make it go 2 times faster. Yeah. But they still work out as having exactly the same kinetic energy.
So he keeps saying it because his one experiment done his poorly way. So we know that in the billiard ball experiment, it wasn't exactly the same. So he's just going to keep, what he's doing is just, again, as I've stated before, these are just noisemakers. So they just keep doing experiments in all these different ways, coming up with different numbers, and then making a proof claim, even though their own results are inconsistent.
Each other when you apply the kinetic energy formula. That was borne out in my 31 runs of that cart experiment.
I see, more bullshit. He has to keep referring to his other completely flawed, horrible experiments where he compresses the spring all the way, which you're not supposed to do. Maximum compression, forcing the spring all the way collapsed, and releases him with his hands. Too silly.
Experiment, yeah, and that was also using the same frame counting method I used here that you disputed. It does work semi-automatically.
Whatever. Where did I do this disputing? Where did that happen, liar? I mean, you're such a fucking liar. It's just amazing. Where did I make an argument about the frame counting method? That didn't happen.
You just have to set it to 0 and let it count the frames for you so you don't make mistakes. So I don't make mistakes.
Yeah, whatever. I'd really rather do it, I'd rather not rely on the technology if you don't have to. And counting to 50 isn't all that much work.
I do make mistakes, as you well know. But this isn't one of them.
Oh, so he says he didn't make it. This video isn't a mistake. So even though he completely ignored the very subject, he said the other video was tainted by. So the first video was tainted by a lack of understanding of that angular momentum problem. But not this video. Hilarious.
Remember, Gary,
Ugh, It's almost a violation of the soul of the earth that the shithead could utter my name, without a lightning bolt striking him appropriately immobile.
It wasn't until the weight of the cart was reduced from 4 kilograms.
Yeah, the weights are all sliding inside the cars. I mean, the experiment's a piece of shit. Yeah. And there's, some are over the axle, some are, in the middle of the cart. I mean, piece of shit. Really big, heavy metal wheels in the sense of, their angular momentum problem.
Down to 1 kilogram in 100-gram stages, that it finally managed to go 2 times faster, launched by the same spring in every case. Yes, there may have been little tiny imperfections, but they were tiny.
Oh, yeah, bullshit. No tiny imperfections. It's just amazing shit this guy talks. Amazing shit. So it's just like the Ian Gosling compressed spring experiment where he uses 7 springs piled on top of each other. Doesn't tie them to each other, doesn't tie them to the ground, doesn't create any obligation for all the energy to go in the one direction it's supposed to. Nothing. It's this whole argument about hitting versus pushing. Hitting something and pushing something are 2 different functions.
Imperfections, 1 or 2 things slid about a little bit. Very, very tiny imperfections. Very slight error. But you don't point out those errors in Toadie's experiment, do you? So you've got to be fair.
What do you mean? I wasn't insanely impressed by Toadie's experiment, but the fact of the one experiment is just undeniable. Okay, I mean, he has the 2 objects drop, the 5 mass and the 10 mass, all right, from at the appropriate speeds and collide. So he's essentially saying, let's test the 10-ton train, 5-ton train. Let's have a head-on collision between the 5-ton train going 10 miles an hour and the 10-ton train going 5 miles an hour. Now, if this kinetic energy crap was real and momentum was fake, right, momentum won't decide where the crash goes. Kinetic energy should. So if this has twice the fucking energy in it, it really should push the crash in that direction. No doubt about it. The crash should move that way. Just like in a car crash, the car with the more momentum pushes the crash in its direction. But what happened? Oh, it didn't go anywhere. The crash was right at this point, and that's it. It didn't go this way. It didn't go that way. The energy just went back. It reflected, indicating, yes, they'd have the same amount of energy. So fuck you. The experiments do not say what you claim they say, and clearly you're missing. Your physics hasn't done any of them. 350 years to show us something like a glimmer of an experiment, just even a half experiment, showing us that it takes 4 times the fuel to go twice as fast. You can't come with anything anywhere close.
And judge both experiments fairly. And mine was a far more...
Okay, so again, more crap. Judge them fairly. I fairly pointed out that the billiard ball thing wasn't that bad. Okay. And okay, you have 19 and 11. It's not perfect 2-to-1. That's disappointing, I could argue. But frankly, it's a long way from 1.4.
Accurate experiment. If you dispute that, then you're being dishonest with yourself.
No, you're being dishonest, insanely dishonest. The whole point was, for a month and a half, you've had a chance to think about angular momentum, and here you produce a video that grotesquely ignores it as a phenomenon and doesn't account for it at all. So the whole reason he redid the video was to prove angular momentum ruined the first video. And again, as I stated, what does he do? He uses angular momentum to pervert the results. He uses the fact that he can force the lighter object to go slower by putting all of its mass on the outside and putting most of the mass of the other object on the inside.
Because Toadie even suggested I do that experiment before he knew I'd done it already, which only goes to show...
Oh, bullshit, some more bullshit. I'm sure Toadie could utter the words, I wanted it done right, not wrong.
how little attention people pay.
Again, how little attention people pay. You're proving the point. This bar, you and Ian have done experiments in numerous ways and got various results. How are you showing that you have any regard for your obligation to show consistency? That every one of these experiments has obvious variables in them that are flaws. It's a flaw to have 7 springs not tied to each other. It's a flaw not to have the pushing thing, the object doing that, and recognize that if it's flying in the air, that somehow you haven't gotten all the energy into the object. If your spring is leaving the building after it's done its work, well, then it didn't obviously put all of the energy into the object. I mean, obvious flaws.
Which only goes to show how little attention people pay to experiments. They should see.
Oh, yeah, how little attention your science and you are paying to your obligation to show things that you claim to be true with corroborating, with more than. Okay, one silly example. You have nothing close to showing it taking 4 times the fuel to go twice as fast. You have nothing close to showing twice the velocity is somehow 4 times the energy. Nothing. You have no way of demonstrating this as a fact at all. And then you have things like the Mythbusters experiment that just overtly are showing you it's bullshit, okay? They crash a car at 100 miles an hour. They crash a car at 50 miles an hour. There's no evidence that the 100-mile-an-hour crash is 4 times the damage. Not even close to any evidence of 4 times the damage. I mean, this is just such bullshit. Just as there's no professional bowler using a fucking 8-pound ball. It's supposed to have twice as much energy. I mean, you're just so full of shit. To sit there and talk as if you've demonstrated anything except you hate to have the obligation to actually back up your claims with some kind of real evidence.
Before they criticise. I mean, nice though the man is, he had no qualms about trying to humiliate me by making up a story that I'd used a nail instead of a proper bearing in one of them.
Oh, amazing. So this is his reason to slander Toady all over the place. I mean, you should hear go back in time and look at all the crappy comments they have. Just amazing. And it's because he didn't think using a nail was a great idea or something. This is all you have to do to offend this moron enough that he'll slander you. Hilarious.
My experiments.
Oh, what a lovely talk this was.
This is a proper bearing.
Look at him.
Falling on the floor. That is a proper bearing.
Can't even hold it. Look at this. I mean, it really is a piece of shit, right? I mean, come on. I mean, this plastic tube bends in it, all kinds of reasons to say, what the fuck is this? And what does this have to do with the subject anyway? This isn't a balance. I mean, just hilarious. Not even, okay, so he's just going to go recycling through this old horse shit. Fuck all this crap. So enough of this one. I don't even know if I'll play one of them. It's just so, I don't have an obligation to put up with his horse shit. Let's see which ones he did 3, posted 3 videos apparently. Oh, an interesting old hypothesis. This is his stupid, where he was saying that it was Lenz's law that was moving photons. Some sort of magnetic effect. Yeah, sure it was. All right. So I don't know what he's going to say here, but this is just it's such a fucking lie that I've ever said a single photon spreads out. I mean, it's such a fucking lie. I mean, I've only argued that it's discrete energy. Now, photons do have a polarization. They do land on a surface as something that hits more than one atom. The photon is received by a group of atoms, and that's how they create electricity. They don't hit single electrons. The whole photon can't hit a single electron. A photon hits a group of atoms, a group of electrons, essentially, more than one electron in sequence. And it is the accumulated velocity that produces in one electron that produces the electricity. The electricity is accumulated because more than one thing happens, and it happens at a period, okay, in time, and that decides how much energy the electron will get, is how fast that frequency is. I mean, so is he going to play any of my actual videos, or is he just going to lie about what I said? I mean, this title is just such a lie. I mean, it's just unacceptable. So he doesn't really understand photons at all. So he says single photons don't spread out, Gary's claim. So again, it's just so obnoxiously not my claim. Where the fuck did I ever say a photon spreads out? I'm arguing against any notion of a wave or any of that crap. Only collectively. So wave drawings are misleading. What is the fact that this moron thinks he knows something about a single photon, that you can even create it, or how these experiments make the argument that they're creating single photons. Again, I've already mentioned the Veritasium video so many times, and these morons can't, they can't catch on that, oh yeah, well, you're right. I mean, obviously, you're doing this idea of diminishing how much light can get through a bunch of filters. And you're saying, I'm going to diminish the light so much that there's only one photon that gets through per every minute. So you could say that, yeah, well, I'll just take 10 days to do the experiment, or 20. Now, when the guy who first did this experiment of attempting to do this low energy experiment, he went sailing for 40 days. He started the experiment and just took off. And let it really long time exposure to guarantee there was only one photon at a time. Very low emission of photons. Now the problem is these people don't really understand how photons get through the filters. That is, they're just getting through a bunch of little slits, and they weave their way through, and the pieces collectively come out as a photon. And so you can make photons from pieces from different locations. It's not, well, anyway, they don't understand photons at all. So anyway, back to the story. So Veritasium couldn't get the experiment to work when he did it over 10 hours and 5 hours. Didn't work. He had to cut it down to 5 minutes. So what do you think the odds are that the only reason why cutting the time dramatically shorter amount of time, that is forcing more photons into the experiment over a shorter amount of time, why would that work? Oh, that's right, it would work because that's pretty much guaranteeing that there are more than one photon in the experiment at the same time. Well, anyway, I mean, these people are just such liars.
I want to try and clear up a misunderstanding or two about photons.
He doesn't know anything. What the fuck is this shit?
Yeah. The old coca-tin telephone experiment, isn't it, the kids used to do before they could afford a proper telephone.
Shut up.
I'm not sure how this will work out, but I'll give it a go.
Why am I
but I really want to try and clear up some misunderstandings I think most people have about the diagrams that we're given by mainstream science that are a little bit misleading, and it's understandable why most of us get the wrong end of the stick. So I just want to have a go at try and clear up.
So he won't clear up anything because he himself doesn't understand a photon at all.
The misunderstanding. Because then we can move on, can't we, if we're all on the same page. Let's start with people my age will remember this old trick of two coca-tins, two cups with a string linking them, and then you talk down one end and the sound comes out the other, and you talk to your friend. Hello, what are you doing? I'm listening to you talk shit. And the sound would travel down the string, wouldn't it, from one cup to the other, in theory. It was never very good, was it? But it worked, just about. You listen to me through this webcam mic, it's important you understand that. This is the microphone. Now, so you're listening to the sound that's being transmitted down this.
So this is all, he's going to do an analogy to sound again. So it's waves or water or some other kind of bullshit, and photons ain't doing that. It's not the same pattern created. The single slit in sound, doesn't do the same thing the single slit does in light.
String, shall we call it, piece of tape, obviously, but down this piece of tape to that cup. So I'll just rub my finger on the tape, because without the cup, that's the sound of me rubbing my finger on the tape, yes? Now with the cup,
Fascinating.
Try flicking the tape. Don't suppose you can hear that much. Over the cup. Clearly, the sound is travelling from the one end of the tape to the other. It's going in a pretty much straight line. I don't know if it's wiggling like a snake, or if it's like a compression, or if it's like down a spring.
It's like electricity, probably, moron. But whatever. Continue.
I'm not sure. It might be a combination of those two effects. I'm not entirely sure what type of wave it is that transmits down there. All I know is it transmits down there, and it's clearly a wave, because sound is a wave, isn't it? The reason for showing you...
So again, sound's a wave, isn't it? Why would I think sound's a wave? It's a bunch of little molecules in the atmosphere. So it only works in a medium, and only works where atoms are connected to each other. And why do I need waves again? Why can't sound go this way and go that way and go that way as a pushing force? I'm just banging into atoms, those atoms are banging into other atoms, and the whole thing is just spreading out of scatter. Why wouldn't that be a perfectly acceptable explanation? The same way photons are created from the sun. They're, this little individual discrete thing that travels in very straight lines over very great distances. Why wouldn't the ray theory be perfectly sensible?
This was so I could explain that. Well, a challenge to you. How would you draw that wave travelling down that string? How would you draw that wave reasonably accurately? I need a ladder.
As dominoes, frankly. There's atoms smashed into each other. You can hit them. They'll bang into somebody else in the same direction. So you're pushing a force in one direction. You could push it that way. You could push it almost in any direction. And they're all touching each other, so it'll go either way. And that's all it is. And so you push the sound in that direction. The dominoes hit each other. They fall over. They just cascade down the substance. What's so complicated?
If we were just drawing sound waves of, say, a nice simple tone, you'd say, like, was that nice enough for you? You'd say, well, it's just simple waves like that. It's spread out, don't they? Exponentially, they spread out like waves on a pond.
So again, just rays could perfectly illustrate what's happening. The stuff is moving the same speed because the stuff is it's all the same material. And when you hit, when you try to push one, he pushes against his neighbors, he pushes against his neighbors, and so it starts to scatter in terms of its direction. But it has a maximum speed, so yes, the leaders are all going in their direction at the same rate, and you can draw it as a wave, but there's stuff in between those waves. There's not no stuff.
No problem. But the same can't apply, surely, where you're just transmitting sound down a piece of string, can't you? Because
it's a vibration by nature. Okay, it has a frequency. Okay, so you push, and then it just goes in raise. What's so hard to figure out? You could diagram it as laser beams. You can diagram it. You can choose to diagram it as rays, and it works just fine. Rays that start and stop, start and stop, start and stop.
The sound is now going a direct path, isn't it? So now, if I said, well, draw me the same thing, but this time, sound being sent from that cup, down several strings, there to there, from there to there, crossing paths. You say, well, I don't know how I'm going to do that. How would you do it? Should we pause and have a little think about that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? How would you honestly draw that if it was sound being transmitted down a string from cup to cup? How would you honestly draw the waves? Because you couldn't draw it like that, could you? That would be dishonest, wouldn't it? It would work.
I don't even know what he's talking about. Why would I even try? But we know that sounds will combine in this atmosphere and distort each other. So, they obviously have a vector nature in the sense that they are colliding.
But it wouldn't be right, would it? Because there aren't those sorts of waves anymore. They aren't spreading out. The sound transmitted from that cup to the other cup, it isn't spreading out exponentially, is it? No, it's taking a direct path, isn't it?
It's stuck inside of a conductor. So I mean, it would scatter out if the fact is, it needs the medium to perpetuate its motion. You need the dominoes. Without the dominoes in the medium, there's no dominoes. Okay, so all that can come out are fragments or pieces or whatever. So I mean, the fact that you're forcing it into a container. How is that miraculous? That's like pouring water in a jar and saying, "Why doesn't the water go everywhere?" Well, but it's stuck in the jar, moron.
A to B. So to draw that would be silly, wouldn't it? It wouldn't. It would work, like I say, but it would be a misrepresentation of the real wave, because the real wave we know is going down a very controlled path. It's not spreading out exponentially.
It's not a wave; it's just a frequency. An event that has a period. It starts. Boom, 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 boom. Not that complicated. You're firing bullets. One bullet. Wait a little while, another bullet. Not complicated. There, that's a frequency. No waves involved.
Yeah. Now the thing is, though, we have the same problem when we explain light travelling, from A to B. See, this is analogous of a particle, isn't it? It travels from there, the source, to there, and it lands in one specific place, but it's still a wave, isn't it? Or it goes from there to there, a longer path.
Why is it still a wave? And he's saying it goes from here to there, or it goes from here to here. Well, those are separate events. It's not the same event. Their theory is the same photon is going to all these locations, but somehow, it only makes an electrical impulse when at one location. I mean, it's a ridiculous theory. They're saying energy is going everywhere, but somehow the wave consolidates into one point. I mean, it's made up. There is no mechanical analogy for what they are suggesting.
And it lands as a particle, as a dot. It has locality. It's there, not there, and not there. It's there. So it's landing as a particle to all intents and purposes. If the sound made a
So let's go, it's not. So that's again the argument, is it doesn't land as a particle. It lands as a sequence of events because it happens on a surface and it creates electricity, which we know is something that requires more than one atom's participation. So just more bullshit.
When it landed, it would leave a dot there, and just like in the light experiments, it would leave a mark there, and you'd say, "Oh, well, it's a particle." But then
so what's the point of saying a dot? So what do you think? Do you think the whole photon hits one single electron, and that's the event? That's a photon, or are you sensible enough to understand the photon has a polarization that's thousands of atoms across? How can something as big as thousands of atoms across hit a single electron? And the frequency could be a mile long. How could the electron be in the same location to feel a frequency that takes a mile long of time to get to the electron? Wouldn't the electron be someplace else by the time the frequency got to it? Come on. It doesn't make any sense. A photon is an event. It's an event. It's an event. It's made of composite events. Eventlets. Little eventlets happen. Okay.
It's a wave. It's a wave because it travels down as a wave. It vibrates, doesn't it? So how can it be both things? You say, well, wave particle duality sound. You know what I mean? Okay, yeah, I'm stretching the point just to get the point across. I'm not literally claiming that sound is wave particle duality.
Okay, whatever you are claiming, who the fuck could know what the fuck you're claiming? It is just such a pile of nothing. The fact is that it can be understood as it's made of discrete bits, and the discrete bits are creating a frequency. The photon isn't a thing. It's dot, dot, dot. It's a piece of code. It's a pattern that moves through space. Not complicated, really.
Reality. I'm just using this as an analogy to explain why it's difficult to draw how light would transmit from that point to that point if it waves like this does and it lands in a specific.
So it's like it's hard to figure out how a Morse code signal could be sent to another location. No, it really isn't that hard. Just to understand a pattern caused, and you can send it somewhere. I could shoot bullets, dot, dash, dot. I could shoot small bullet, big bullet, small bullet, but more, physically I could just send them at a frequency. And the same bullet and the frequency could land at the target and create the same pattern, dot, 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 that I sent. What's complicated about that theory? What says that can't be the simple truth?
Local place analogous to wave particle duality. There's no fair way of drawing how that wave goes because it would look like this, wouldn't it? Hang on.
Oh, brother. So I don't know why he's bothering with this shit, right? He's the one who's done the double slit experiment. He knows the two experiments are fundamentally different, the double slit pattern and the single slit pattern. He knows that conventional physics isn't paying any attention to those two differences at all. It'll show you the single slit pattern and say, look, it's a double slit pattern. When it clearly isn't a double slit pattern. Doesn't have any of the features of a double slit pattern. He knows all this. What's he wasting time with this crap for? Their theory is that the photon is doing this and this at the same time. I mean, who cares? I mean, who thinks there's a mechanism for all of that motion? It's too stupid. It's so frickin' silly.
I've got to be honest, I'm quite enjoying it. It's like playtime, isn't it, at school? There's something quite satisfying about being able to draw a decent wiggly line without having to make the effort. Play that funky music, white boy.
Oh, God, it's just hard to watch this shit.
To draw these waves, realistically...
Well, what the fuck, these waves in a tape measure? I mean... Vibrations, frequencies... Waves?
You'd have to draw them something like that, wouldn't you? If there was another set on top of that, starting from there, say, they would be out of phase with one another, but you wouldn't want to draw it like that because it would look a right mess, wouldn't it? In fact, should I do that? Yeah, I think I'm going to do that, actually, yeah.
Alright, so I've already demonstrated that the slit experiments can be shown, it can be just proven. That the only reason why the infinitesimally small slits are used is because it destroys two of the point sources. You can't have any constructive interference or destructive or constructive interference between 2 points that are so close to each other that you can't draw a wavelength of difference line from any location in space from those 2 points because they're too close to each other. There's not a wavelength of difference anywhere in the universe looking at those 2 points. So they can't produce any pattern. And that's all they've done. They've taken the two-slit experiment, destroyed two of the surfaces, essentially by making them so close together that they can't be resolved as two separate points. And all you have to do is open the slit wide enough, and all of a sudden you have those two sources back, proving that the entire phenomenon is not being created by every photon going through. That the entire phenomenon is being created by photons that go by the surface. It's only photons that hit the surface that actually create the fringe light. All of the fringe light, the bent light, is being created by photons that travel next to a surface. That's the fact I have demonstrated to be a fact. Okay, the logic is irrefutable. You will not play this clip of this video explaining it. I'll draw it, okay, just to make it absolutely clear, okay, that it's a decisive piece of evidence against any notion that photons should be understood as a wave flying out of the entire slit opening. It's not where the light's coming from. All right, so you have the two distinct patterns. 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1, 2, 3. Okay, and so you can understand this is a double slit pattern. A single slit pattern looks like this. Okay, now the thing you can notice is this central maxima is twice as large. This is twice as large as these two nodes by a factor close to 6 to 5. You can see it right here. There's always going to be an odd number here, and there'll be an incrementally different number there. That'll always be almost this. I mean, sorry, 6. I should put 3 here. Okay, but you understand 2 times 3 was 6, which is close to. So this is just the center maxima. It's just made of an overlap between two nodes. Two nodes overlap, and you know its distance is a little less than twice because of the overlap. All right, and so you can understand that this pattern really is two single slit patterns just superimposed on each other. But anyway. You can see the real difference between the two patterns, okay? And the only similarity is that the envelope pattern has a similarity to this pattern in the sense that the center is twice as big as the fringe nodes, but there's no breaks, and this is the key feature of the double slit. Now what you'll find out is if you take two openings, I mean you make a double slit pattern, and say if you make these openings really small, infinitesimally small, you can sort of understand that the distance to this point, any point along the same line, so they're both lines are going to be on top of each other. This distance will be right on top of that distance, and you can understand that if this distance is less than a wavelength, then there can never be a wavelength of difference in these two lines. They can never be a wavelength. One can't be a wavelength longer than the other one from these 2 points. And clearly, what's happening is they do the Young double slit experiment, this silly drawing of two waves coming out, okay, ends up creating a single slit pattern. This is the pattern they get when they use infinitesimally small slits, because they're basically saying, okay, these 2 points are no longer surfaces that are relevant. And the only ones that are relevant is this big surface here. Okay. So you've reduced the double slit into a single slit pattern because you've basically said that the only places where there's a wavelength of difference are in these longer locations. You have to be further, the surfaces have to be further apart from each other to create the longer distance. So what you can find out mathematically is that the number of wavelengths that fit in this maximum distance will correspond to the size of these little nodes, and the shortest distance between two surfaces, whether it's this one or the distance between the slits, that's the one making this envelope pattern. So this pattern is being controlled by the shortest distance, and this pattern is being controlled by the maximum distance. And all you're saying basically is when all 4 surfaces are in phase, that is, there's the same full wavelength of difference between all 4 surfaces, so it's not half wavelengths or quarter wavelengths, they're all in phase, then you have a bright spot, and you have a dark when only 2 of them are in phase. So when only 2 are in phase, it's dark. When both of them are in phase, it's a light, and that's why the 2 overlap here, where there's a null. The null is being created because you're missing all 4 surfaces contributing. Only 2 of the surfaces contributed here, and only 2 of the surfaces contributed there because the other one was out of phase. And that's what's creating the double slit pattern. But the only photons that are relevant are ones from the surface. The math works. This correlates to the size of these little ones. This correlates to the size of the envelope. And it's easy to understand why there's a double maxima, is because these sources are essentially 2 separate experiments, one going this way and one going this way, separated by a millimeter of distance, and those 2 experiments overlap. The 0 point is inside of a millimeter. There is no guarantee that you have the same distance here. The middle is inside a tiny amount of space. This pattern, the middle would be here. So there's no guarantee that that's an on or that's an off, because what's really deciding is this distance. This is the slit distance here. This is the other surface. This distance is the fixed distance. And if this is a half wavelength here, you know this is an off. You know this first one is an off here. You know there's no photon there. And this is where the pattern really starts. And so the pattern is forced by this direction. This line is the one that is the real teller of what you're going to have here in terms of how large that central maximum will be. That's probably enough detail. I've done complete double slit analysis videos, but those facts have been ascertained. So the photons don't, every photon that goes through the slits, most of the photons just go right through the slits, no problem. They hit the center. That's why the center is so bright. And the only photons creating all of the fringe light is all being created by photons that hit the surface. A completely mechanical explanation. Scatter. The photons are being scattered at the surface. They're going randomly to different locations, and sometimes and where they land, they'll either be in phase or out of phase with all the other pieces being shot by the other surfaces. All the pieces are flying. They're going to get to locations at different times based on the length of those lines. And the fact is, they'll either be in phase with another piece, or they won't be in phase with another piece. If they're in phase with another piece, there'll be a photon. If they're not in phase, they won't be a photon. There's a 50-50 chance. So it's just really, you're just breaking some photons and remaking them out of the pieces. Period. Nothing, no woo, no superpositions, no wavicles, no wobbles, none of that crap. All straight line vectors of momentum.
It would look really shit, I think. So that would be more honest representation of waves travelling down as a ray, shall we say. But the problem with that is, even though we can clearly see there would be interference here.
So it's idiotic to call these rays that are doing whatever this crap is. How could they do that? How they know how to do all that wobbly crap? And again, it's not all the photons. They're from specific point sources. The surfaces are the point sources in the fringe pattern. All of the pattern can be traced back to a surface.
Constructive interference and destructive interference. It's a lot harder to see where it would be. It's harder to pick out where the constructive and destructive interference is. Whereas if we do it with the other system, if we do it with that, oops, that wasn't very good, was it? My pen slipped. Can you pretend you didn't see that? You get the idea. It's just, it starts to look more like the classic interference.
Yeah, the classic interference pattern that doesn't get mathematically correct answers. Again, so this young double slit thing will not create a double slit fringe pattern in the first place. Two open slits won't do that. If they are infinitesimally small, you won't get the double slit pattern, and you certainly aren't going to. So you're not even getting the right pattern. How can you predict the location of anything? So yes, you're going to get a lot of wrong answers.
So you see where it becomes quite obvious where the constructive interference is, doesn't it? Yeah. Hey presto, we start.
So nothing interferes in space. There is no interference with the waves in the space. That can be proven with the radar experiment, where you send the two signals opposing each other. So they're not flying through the same space. They're not crossing. They never see each other. You put a single antenna between the two sources opposed to each other with radio waves, and you'll get exactly the same interference pattern, but the two waves never touched each other. They never crossed, ever. They couldn't constructively and destructively interfere with each other. That can't be the explanation. But what they can do is land on the surface in phase or out of phase, and that's the key. a discrete particle hits the surface, the one on the opposite side can hit the surface at the same time or it cannot. That's going to decide whether there's a photon or not a photon.
To get the classic interference pattern. I think we can all see that, can't we? It's not perfect, but it's clearer than the other one. It would help if I hadn't started in the middle, then that's the start, then go there. So the first wave, the blue, started, that was the...
So there's no wave. The center light goes straight through the two slits, makes the very bright centers. The centers are always bright unless you're using the single needle experiment, which is the double slit, is the single slit experiment. Two surfaces. The two surface, you can have the two surface experiment this way, you can have the two surface experiment this way. If you do it this way, obviously there's nothing going through and all you have is the fringe pattern, because none of the light going straight into the impediment is going to hit the surface. So obviously you'll have a lot less photons that actually create the fringe. It's the same fringe photons, same number of fringe photons, but obviously in one case you're spreading a bunch of light that's going to go onto the surface, where at least in the slit you have a block on this side and a block on that side, so you're not dulling the pattern. But you're going to get the same pattern because it's just the surfaces that are deciding. The location of the surfaces is all you need to know.
The starting point, wasn't it? And the other one was there. The second one was there. So no wonder it's a bit lopsided. Well, you can see now, can't you? Just the wrong tits, haven't I? There. So I'm doing me Sir Isaac Newton the Willows trick there, aren't I? Need me curly wig now. Yeah, so that's the central maxima in this case, isn't it? Yeah. It's got to be the worst drawing I've done for a while.
Yes, it's terrible.
So there you go, central maxima there, and the other maxima either side of it.
So it makes no sense, right? Central maxima should be brighter, but why is it twice as big? That drawing won't create twice as big central maxima. Water waves don't create a double central maxima. So where did it come from? Where's the correlation to light? Oh, that's right, it doesn't exist. Conventional physics has no explanation for the double central maxima. It has no explanation for the missing photon. It's just a fact.
Yeah, I'm distracted now by having drawn a pair of tits without meaning to. But that's easier to see the interference than it is here. I don't know how I would begin to...
He really is Butthead, of Beavis and Butthead. He's a fucking 12-year-old.
Mark. Because we're not used to marking interference this way, are we? I'm trying to look at it that way, because is it...
Alright, so this is Bose.
With
this is Boseian mechanics. Okay, so this is the Boseian style drawing. So he's not really doing anything here new. But it doesn't work. Okay, that's not mathematically correct.
The drawing, it's not as easy to demonstrate interference, is it? We've made life harder for ourselves. So, the point I'm trying to get at is this. The reason we're always shown drawings like this is because it's so much harder to draw the reality.
It's not a reality, so again, it's more nonsense. Where's he proving this, whatever that is, this wavy ray thing, this wavy ray theory? Why would they draw a stupid reality? The photon is moving at a constant speed, so even this wavy crap doesn't even work in the sense that the photon's moving at a constant speed. It can't be moving different amounts of directions in the same distance. So even that part doesn't even make any sense.
If they were compression waves, then these illustrations would be wrong too, but they would be closer than that. But that will do as a substitute for that, as long as the wavelengths represent the wavelengths that are represented here too. You know what I mean? As long as the wavelengths there are the same as the wavelengths there, then that diagram is easier to draw and used to illustrate and calculate, shall we say, the interference.
So he thinks this is helpful to someone, and this is the kind of stuff like, oh, you didn't play my whole video and I had lots of brilliant content in it. Amazing. So he says, why the actual wave of a single photon? So where if you're demonstrating knowledge of what a single photon is, or even sound traveling down a string, perhaps analogous to a single photon? Why? And then he puts it in bold. Are so different from to draw accurately. So difficult to draw accurately. Oh, here's the part where he says something about my claim. Let's see if... Okay, we resort to drawing something that looks like water waves spreading out from a puddle dropped in a pond. Well, and obviously a pond puddle, a single perturbation of the field, doesn't create any pattern at all. No fringe pattern. Single slit in water doesn't create any fringes. Okay, but that can only represent a collection of photons diverging, whereas Gary has claimed for years that individual photons are somehow supposed to do this. Do what? What a liar. I mean, it's just such a fucking lie. What Gary's claimed for years is that individual photons are composite objects, that it's a frequency. The only way you can make a frequency is to have a bit, a bullet, a bullet. You have to have 3 bullets, to make your frequency. The first bullet, the second bullet, and the third bullet confirms. Or, you have to have at least 2. But clearly 3 bullets is even better. Okay, at establishing a period between impacts. Gary's been saying that for fucking 10 years. Pretty much. Gary has always considered a photon as an event. Anyway, I don't think anyone actually does try to imply they do. I don't think anyone actually does try to imply they do. I think it's Gary's misunderstanding. So again, where did you demonstrate that with any of this slop? Certainly didn't prove my diagrams inaccurate. Okay, unfortunately, it suits Gary to have such misunderstandings because then he can say, just look at how ridiculous their theory is. Yes, by comparison to a rational, logical one, theirs is obviously ridiculous. Okay, a photon spreads out as it travels across space. Then when it lands on the target, suddenly all the energy manifests in just one tiny spot on the screen or whatever. I don't know who he's quoting here. I mean, obviously it's not my theory, so I don't know what the fuck he's saying here. So again, the whole video is just premised on a grotesque lie. Alright. I don't say anything about photons spreading out. It's just a lie. Alright, if that's what physics claims, then I would say that is ridiculous too. I just don't think they do claim that. They claim the motherfucking things are entangled, you idiot. I think it's just Gary's twisting their claims to suit his argumentative agenda. A completely different diagram of reality. I mean, again, even Einstein concedes that his bent space is ether. They think there's these fields. They think there's 400 different fields of something, some sort of mush. And when the mush consolidates, they call that an electron or a human being. I mean, it's all bullshit. A straw man, I guess. Anyway, that's what I'm trying to clarify here. So, he added some clarification to anything here? What a fucking liar. I can't believe I'm this far into this. I want to get to some comments. I should get to the comments on the other video, frankly. Yeah. I think Piro commented. Didn't read them, but... Alright, let's just try to get through the rest of whatever this slop is. And it is just slop. I've got the fucking neighbors making noises now. There's always some kind of crap, I tell you. People are just... the shit they do.
Constructive and destructive. interference fringes, then that's harder to draw and it's harder to interpret. And that's why nobody draws rays of light like that. So nobody draws it like that because we would have so much difficulty trying to interpret where the constructive and destructive interference took place. It's easy when it's drawn like that.
Oh, it's just too silly. Like I said, the Boseian drawing does work, or is it Boseian? What the hell's the name of it? Anyway, the non-Copenhagen. I don't know if it's probably still Copenhagen-ish. But it doesn't work. It isn't mathematically correct.
But that is a misrepresentation of the actual nature of electromagnetic radiation. Electromagnetic radiation is more like that. It's more like a ray. It's transmitted from A to B. See, this is a contentious issue. Gary, when I first wanted to learn about the double slit experiments and I was new to it, I've been doing it myself for a few weeks at home and struggling a little bit to understand why I was getting interference patterns from a single slit instead of a double slit. I went on YouTube and I came across, among other videos, yours. And I started to think, well, oh, your arguments made sense. You were saying that the single slit pattern is the same as the double slit pattern, essentially, and the simplest pattern in the universe, and it's been wrongly ascribed to wave interference. Yeah, and I was willing to go along with all this and take on board what you're saying, at least.
So, and again, now the argument's only gotten so much stronger once I recognized that scatter can produce the exact pattern. It's just in phase, out of phase. There's only two choices: in phase, going in phase with something else, or going out of phase with something else. There's no other choice. Okay, so yeah, if I just break the photons at the surfaces, the bits are still flying through the space, and I either land in sequence ... or I land ... or out of sequence in time. So I'm either going to be in sequence in time or out of sequence in time. The stuff landing at any one location will either be in the right frequency or it won't. Those are the two choices.
Consider it and give it due credence, so to speak. Think about it. But when you came to, I remember you used to show us diagrams like this and say, well, how can photons be a particle and yet they spread exponentially as they travel for billions of years or whatever, spread exponentially over vast distances, but then when they land, they suddenly all the energy manifests in one there or there or there as a particle, as a dot.
Yeah, that's their theory. It's ridiculous and stupid. And they say they're entangled, that they actually know what each other's conditions are in a sense. And so it's some sort of conspiracy, between whatever these locations in deciding, making the decision of where the photon will be.
First thing, yeah, that's crackers, isn't it? But the problem is, Gary, that isn't what scientists claim. And I think any scientist who does think that happens has him or herself misunderstood. I don't think 99.9.
I mean, this is just ridiculous, right? I mean, I played the Feynman video. He says it's random. Every photon that goes through a surface, somehow the universe imposes a random fact on it, and a random imposition of you're going to be randomized. I mean, it's a pile of shit.
Percent of scientists think that happens. I'm not sure whether you really think that happens. I'm not sure whether you are really just strawmanning the argument a little bit by pretending that you think that's what they...
I mean, it's just so pathetic. You play every fucking video on the subject and not one of them is anywhere in the rational realm. I mean, how the fuck can this idiot say, that's not what they're saying? Of course that's what they're saying, you fucking idiot. They're saying every single photon that goes through the slit is interfered with by this process, is part of the process. Yet 95% of the light lands in a tiny location. I mean, that should be a giveaway right away, that what they're talking is bullshit. Because why do most of the photons go straight through? Fucking idiot.
Claim. I don't think that's what they claim. I don't think that they claim that a photon spreads out and out and out and out over ever expanding distances, vast distances, getting weaker all the way. Then as soon as it lands somewhere, all its energy manifests there and disappears from everywhere else it was going. Not from one photon. No, I don't think that's what any other.
All right, so I'm just saying that's what every theoretical physicist believes. So I'm just saying he's arguing with what they believe. I mean, Piro actually says it. It's the essence of the photon is hitting Venus and then bouncing off, and all kinds of bullshit, But that's the essence, the spirit, the photon spirit goes to Venus.
I'm claiming, but when you draw this diagram and exploit it to explain the double slit experiment, I feel like you're playing a crafty game, Gary. I think you're Unless you're genuinely misunderstanding it.
Oh, this is just so stupid. I mean, I'm not playing any game at all. I'm making it overtly clear. I'm saying, as Einstein stated in his paper, that the photon is made out of energy corpuscle. Okay, that the photon is a thing, a physical thing in the universe, and it has very, very limited capacity to do anything interesting. It just travels in a fucking straight line unless it hits a fucking electron. I couldn't make it any fucking clearer how fucking there's a cavern of difference between what I'm describing as a photon and what the fucking conventional theory is with their fucking fields and their forces and their interactions in space and all the rest of that horseshit. For you to imply that this is some sort of fucking semantics argument is just such a pile of shit, you fucking liar. Oh, God, you're disgusting.
So you were giving the impression that the wave really is like this and that it somehow has to go through walls. But I'm not explaining myself very well. I need to just pause. I don't want people to have misunderstandings. If you were
I never talk about it as a wave. I never consider it a wave. I never think of it as a fucking function in a medium. I'm always talking about a discrete amount of momentum moving at a frequency. Period. Particles, bits. I mean, I've been saying it's bits for years.
Understanding it, then I want to try and help clear up that misunderstanding so that you can stop repeating your misunderstanding and giving other people the same misunderstanding, because you imparted your misunderstanding.
What a big fucking lie. I mean, I've been pointing it out for years, okay, that it's a frequency between things. There's nothing between the things, okay? The photon isn't a mile long in a radio wave. There isn't a long thing in space that's a mile long doing something. No, there's a discrete bit, and then there's a discrete bit, and there's a distance between them. There's bullets, and there's a distance between them. It's a completely different fucking theory. God, no, just how can anyone be this dishonest?
On me initially, it took me a while to cotton on and think, oh no, nobody's claiming that light does that. They're only drawing it that way because it's so difficult to draw it that way. You know what I mean? It's difficult to draw light in rays and show interference, so they do it that way.
So it's, and again, it's show interference in the actual space it's traveling, which again can be debunked by radar and radio, which demonstrate clearly the two sources don't have to interact at all.
Convenience, but nobody's really suggesting that's what light actually does. You know, and I'm sure you know that. No, I'm not sure you know it, but I like to think that you know it. But if you did, you wouldn't say.
What a liar!
Or would you?
What
See, I don't know. I sometimes
liar.
think that you would deliberately say what you know to be not true.
What a fucking... I've been saying over and over again, nothing interferes in this space. None of this crap happens. There's no constructive wave interfering with some other wave. They land at the surface as a pattern. Period. It's what lands on the surface decides whether it's a photon or it's not a photon. If it's not in sequence, then it's just heat hitting the surface. Period. End of the story. If it is a photon, then it specifically is. I've done this tipping point argument 7 million times. It's a tipping point argument. You add energy to a system by hitting it in a sequence of time, and then you can knock something over. You can throw one baseball, and you can have the thing wobble. And then you throw another baseball at the right time, and you add energy. And you throw it at the right time, and you add more energy. It's a fucking resonant frequency issue, okay? The electrons are cascading, and the energies being input is adding energy to the electrons as they cascade, so they build up velocity and eventually have enough velocity. The last electron has enough velocity to leave the fucking atom. God damn, I have been over this and over this. I mean, for somebody to pervert my claims like this and put this in the fucking goddamn title, he is such an obnoxious, disgusting, lying sack of shit.
In order to score a point. Anyway, before I pack away, yes, I've been doing ripple tank experiments lately, just to show you that I am making efforts that you think...
Yeah, efforts I would say are completely useless. Fucking water is not space. Space is not made out of fucking water, retard. Oh, fuck. God, these people are just so obnoxious. Alright, so let's see what the lying scum, pieces of pus, Piro. Let's see what kind of lying sack of shit crap he says. I mean, can any of these people show the minor integrity to actually quote what I fucking goddamn say? Alright, it's a bit more complicated, I think, because the photon does seem to go through both slits. See, this baby talk, it does seem. Why do you have the impression that it seems that way? What about it seems that way? There's absolutely nothing that actually seems that way. That seems preposterous. The photon isn't infinitesimally small, but it's not gigantic. It can't go through both slits, retard. Alright. And further, in general, according to Feynman calculations, so again, he's bringing up Feynman, who believes every single photon that goes between the slits is randomized, is fucked in some way. No photon travels through the experiment unscathed. And again, I've already, I think, absolutely logically proven the surfaces are everything. The surfaces are the proven math. The surface distance is in the fucking math, proving it's about the fucking surfaces. It's the 2-surface experiment and the 4-surface experiment. That will give you more insight into reality than anything these morons could ever say. These are surface experiments. The entire fringe pattern is created by photons that interact with a surface. They interact with a substance. They do not do any wooey bullshit. They hit stuff. That's what photons do. If they're not hitting stuff, they're not doing anything interesting. All right. Oh, God. Feynman calculations. There's no Feynman calculations, by the way. Feynman is just randomizing every photon. It is as if the particle takes all of the paths and the paths therefore. So exactly what Brozo said, they don't argue. Piro's arguing. Hilarious. Interfere with each other and affect the probability of seeing a dot in a particular location. So he's just asserting exactly what Brozo says. They don't really believe that. They just can't draw it right. Hilarious. Going down the tape measure should look like a wave front traveling down a canal. Yeah, you know. So again, it can't possibly be that the electrons are moving from atom to atom. That is basically kind of an electrical phenomenon. So then he has some kind of linked video that'll be just such a pile of shit. Could you imagine if it's the Feynman with that crappy Feynman drawing? Let's see what it is. We have to see what it is. It is. Oh, that's just so. Oh, this is the later Feynman video, actually. So this one's the one where he's doing all the refraction, making lenses, talking about refraction in water. Yeah, so this doesn't have the classic 2-slit drawing in it. So there's no 2-slit in this one, unfortunately. But his 2-slit diagram is hilarious. Okay. So it's just so funny that he's linking to Feynman mush. And it is mush, I'm sorry. It is just fucking mush. Okay, I agree with the basic point about why we draw just the peaks or troughs. I mean, what's the basic point? Is there a basic point? No, there's no basic point here. They're waves. You're drawing waves. Okay, you're forcing there to be a medium that somehow is controlling the photon in horizontal and magnetic and electrical, and all these different forces are conspiring to create the simplest thing in the universe, a photon. The simplest, most diagrammable point A to point B in a straight line at a constant speed. You can't get something simpler, and they're making it insanely complicated. The thing is, what Gary can reveal is that while QM and relativity are both counterintuitive, I don't even, let's understand, relativity is a fact. There's no disagreement about the fact that things are relative to each other. I am relative to this pen. I have a relative relationship because we have stuff in common. We have stuff we can see that and stuff we can't see. The things we're doing that are the same we can't see. The things we see are the when it does something different. That I can see. Shit. It's just so stupid. are both counterintuitive. Even classic physics has a lot of things which are counterintuitive. Which this again, where is all this counterintuition? Except in things like, yes, okay, it takes 4 times the distance to double your speed in gravity, but that's pretty intuitive once you realize, oh yeah, well you're going faster. Of course it takes 4 times the distance because yeah, you're going faster through the force. At least until we fix our intuition. So more baby talk. So do we, I mean, you can either think long or you can think short. There's no such thing as intuition. There's, think sloppy, think careful. So do we expect it to be intuitive? So we're still using it. I don't. Our brain evolved around practical consistency. This has nothing to do with physics. Not in the way to ensure every possible pattern of nature arrives. Our brains work perfectly good. Our brains are intended to make us be able to see a brick wall and say, gee, guess what? I've learned I can't go through brick walls. I mean, our brains work perfectly well. It's the religion, it's the nonsense you fuckers think is the precious. You're sitting here wasting your time, humping totem poles. That's the problem. The fact is that you desire to live somewhere other than reality. And nature arrives as a totally obvious truth to our common sense. So again, you're not born with any of this shit. There's no common sense. This is just such baby talk. Oh, there's another Piro comment. Fuck. He does this, He watches part of the video, comments, watch part of the it's just such a waste of everybody's time. Sadly, possibility, that is what they are claiming for a single photon. Sadly, possibly, that is what they are claiming for a single photon. So he's directly contradicting Brozo's statement. So, okay, I'll give him a little credit. He has the guts to do that, but he's doing it in some sort of, oh, isn't that sad? That is, as if it spreads out, interferes with itself, and defines the probability by which the dot appears only at one particular place. So they're both, look, we're both arguing that in a sense they're randomizing. That's the same thing as scattering. So the surfaces are doing this randomizing, randomizing. It's not random, it's just appears. Okay, and the surface is either doing something, like the photon, so the surface is pushing electrons in and out. That's what surfaces do. And the photon is going this way, opposing that movement. And you're just basically saying, does it get pushed that way or does it get pushed that way? Which way does it get pushed? Because of the interaction of those two forces. The photon's momentum and the electron's momentum are combined into a new momentum that will perpetuate into a direction. And all you're saying is yeah, so obviously there's all kind of, you're either going to be pushed that way or you're going to push that way. Yeah. I mean, it's just so simple. An explanation completely solves the problem. All right, probably with the dot appears. Okay, why? This is why Feynman says we don't understand, but we know how it's behaving. So again, they don't know anything about its behavior. They know how, what the consequence is. They know the effect, and that's all they think they need to know. It's very much as if the photon traces all the paths, the single photon. So again, just more, how could this be? Question mark. Well, in relativity, for something traveling light speed experiences time all at once. Yeah, so says you. So they know how, they know what something traveling the speed of light is experiencing. They know what it experiences. I mean, like it has a brain and it's experiencing. I mean, oh yeah, it's just so silly. An experience is another one of these event things. Experience isn't a particle, okay? It's a composite object. You have to wait for it. Oh, so it actually takes no time to do this. What just such mush. Of course, that's odd, and we can't understand exactly. Oh, this is just such crap. But it's how the best calculation is made. Now, so let's understand they don't get right answers. Okay, if you explicitly diagram their description, you won't get the right answer, especially in the double slit with a slit wider than infinitesimally small. That is wider than the wavelength of light. If you use a slit an opening wider than that, you won't get the right answers, and it won't be the double slit pattern if it's narrower. It'll be a single slit pattern. And there's no way to do this with just a particle. In that sense, it's acting wave-like. So there's no way, he says. There's no way. They've considered all the possible alternative theories of how the murder was done, and they've eliminated all other suspects except for the butler, of course. I mean, you know, this is just such bullshit that they can possibly make these statements. There's no theory that could possibly explain. Oh, did you think of them all? This issue with the double slit experiment is the constrained example. If its single photon goes through both slits as a probability wave, he's saying the same shit again, interferes with its own probability. That's the wave-like property. So again, you don't need any of that crap, and the Young analysis isn't a double slit pattern. So this is the big joke. The Young double slit experiment doesn't produce a double slit pattern. It's just hilarious that it makes just one dot on the detector. So there's more lies about what actually happens in experiments, as if they have actually done this single dot experiment, and they haven't. Is the particle-like property, you know? So he's, you know, but he's saying the thing lands as if it's a particle, but it travels as if it's a wave. That's their duality thing. But it's just nonsense. It doesn't have to travel as if it's a wave. It can travel as if it's a frequency. And you're either putting it in phase or you're taking it out of phase. And that's all you need to know. This is confirmed by showing the emissions down to just one photon. By slowing the emissions down to just one photon. So again, they don't understand what a photon is, and then they think they can slow the emissions down. Again, all they're doing is putting filters in the way, and those filters are just holes. And so some piece of one photon gets through one place, and a piece gets through another place. And there are a bunch of holes like double slits, so they're going to change the direction of the little bits. And so all they're doing is really doing a million slit experiment. That's what an opaque substance that's going to slow the photon, you know, prevent photons from getting through. All it really is a bunch of little slit experiments. And all you're really going to do is you're going to send a bit from maybe over here will scatter, and a little bit from over here will scatter, and those two will hit the surface at the right frequency, and you'll have a photon event. But that's it. There's no single photon going through the experiment. There's only a reduced amount of broken photons going through the experiment, but they're still there, and the less broken pieces, the less likelihood of making whole photons, but there's still a likelihood. All that explains it just fine. You don't need any of this woo to explain what photons do. Down to just one photon at a time, and seeing the interference though you get one dot at a time. A photon is an event, and you have to create the event with the proper ingredients. So yes, you need the you need the bits of force, the bits of energy to recreate dot dot dot. All right. I don't know if it's worth reading all these replies to this crap. Thanks for adding to the discussion. I thought this one would leave everybody uninterested. Sorry, this has turned out quite long response. Oh, is that what this is? What's the point of responding? He's completely disagreeing with you. There's no point in arguing this. You claim that regular physics doesn't say all this crap. I think it does too, so I agree with Piero. It does in fact say all that crap, you moron. At the time, a few years ago, I did a few more videos, including demonstrations of various kinds of models, hoping to put across my very own... Oh, so he's just going to go into his whole magnetic theory of photons. So here's Gary's name again. I certainly wouldn't be doing a Gary, getting on my high horse, unable to back down from any of my silly statements. So again, just more bullshit. What does this have to do with this fucking subject and making an argument? Why the fuck should I back down from my expectation that the Eddington experiment be repeated? Why should I back down from my expectation that you've had 350 years to prove it takes 4 times the fuel to go twice as fast? A rather dramatic statement. Everybody should be aware of, considering how many people go speeding around here, they should all be aware that they're using twice as much gas to do it, twice as much as their speed indicates. I mean, 4 times the amount of fuel to go twice as fast. As I pointed out in the previous video to this, my enthusiasm was dampened or maybe extinguished altogether when mindless marvels pointed out that interference can only be happening after the photons have left the slits. It can only happen at the fucking surface, frankly, and it isn't interference. There's no interference. There's either in phase or out of phase. I mean, fuck, these people are so stupid. That blew a hole right through the middle of my nice and simple idea that I thought could explain all the quantum weirdness phenomenon. So I don't understand why exactly he thinks mindless marvel proved it happens in the space rather than at the source, the slits. Particularly the idea of a photon going through both slits at the same time and interfering with itself, which for a while I figured could possibly be because photons having a magnetic aspect. So again, the simplest thing in the universe is now magnetic. I mean, people think that's possible. Magnets are made out of dipoles. Dipoles are more complicated than, obviously monopoles. I mean, why would you make the photon magnetic? It's just too stupid. And especially when there's absolutely no evidence that you can move a photon with magnetism. Then then whichever slit it passed through, its magnetism would likely interact with both slits. I mean, just too silly. Let's see, I don't know if I want to read any more of this. I was stuck on the idea that seeing the waveguide manufacturers explain. So, I mean, all of this crap, I mean, he's obviously done all this thinking about this subject and he can't accurately paraphrase my theory. He can't in any way accurately even understand what I have argued. Even though I've made hundreds of videos drawing it, he's still mischaracterizing it. I mean, it's just so obnoxious. Yeah, well, nope. Let's see what Piro said. Interesting, but I don't understand Lenz's law well enough to link this all back to photons. Well, it's just about the fact that there's this magnetic effect. You could argue that that's the only thing that you need to understand it. And so he's basically saying that photons are being controlled by magnetism when there's obviously no indication that photons are at all affected by magnetic fields. I'll watch your video, though, and try to understand. For my part, he's already given up on the theory, so don't bother trying to understand because it's stupid. Alright, for my part, the particle wave thing always seemed to me to mean everything really is a wave. See, everything's a wave. Everything. Bowling balls are waves. Simply because if you have something behaving at a higher dimensional realm, whatever that would be, these higher dimensions, the wave, this sometimes as a lower dimensional thing, you have low dimensions too, then it must really be a higher dimensional thing. I don't know what the fuck is he talking with this dimensional thing again. It's like it's like whatever. I'd say it must be a line and point is a cross section of that line somehow. So a point is a cross section of a line. So you need to believe all this nonsense, whatever this nonsense is. So that still leaves us with the idea that the wave goes everywhere, but all its energy ends up in a location and not another, and that might have ended up at. So yes, it all magically goes to all the magical locations and then it decides to just stay in the cellar. It doesn't solve the strangeness of it. So again, it's really not that strange when you look at it. I mean, you can understand the patterns. You're seeing them right in front of you. You see these 3 and 5, and then it would be 4 and 7, and then it would be 5 and 11. I mean 5 and 9. It's always connected. And you can see all these little things that are always connected. Always, these are the patterns, and they're not that complicated or sophisticated. Alright, but guys, we're looking for why do we perceive just the lower dimensional thing and not rest of the wave, even though we see the evidence of the wave existing? So I mean, I can't even imagine even composing that sentence as a piece of shit. I mean, shit. I don't know. I can't make out of that. Thank you for elaborating. I think I may be able to shed some light, no pun intended, on why this is so. I was so convinced at the time of making these videos that Lenz's law perfectly explains why photons behave the way it does, including the electromagnetic wave aspects theoretically. So again, the whole point is all you have to do is recognize that there's an influence, and the surfaces are the obvious culprit. And what are you're just making the argument, what is the surface doing? Well, it's not making photons go up and down, and it's not making photons go that way, and it's not making photons go that way. It's making photons spread this way. So obviously the surfaces, their influence has to be something going this way. And all you're doing is putting something going this way into something going this way, and you're creating that way and that way. I mean, that part of it is so simple. Oh, these people are just so disgusting. Oh, look, he's got my full name in the goddamn comment again. I mean, these people are just so despicably creepy. Oh, ew. And this Brozo monster, I mean, he can't even say, well, look, that's not necessary, He has a screen name. This is sort of just basic ethics. There's absolutely no reason for me to. I know Pierrot's name. Should I say his real name? What the fuck? No, of course I shouldn't. I mean, it's just so rude. It's just so fucking goddamn rude. And they can't even get that right. I mean, these little tiny, line crossing of cheats. I mean, it's just, again, cheating. Okay? I can't win the argument, so I'll cheat, and I'll, try to trip his kid or something. I'll try to beat the guy in some other way, I'll knife his tires on his car or something. I mean, it's just so fucking goddamn, and that's the character of these assholes. Disgusting. All right, well, that's enough for today. So maybe we'll read some comments on the other video and see if anybody points out, well, Brozo, you're complaining about angular momentum, and then you basically use the same variable, in a way that distorts the experiment. I mean, that's really dumb. You complain about angular momentum distorting the first experiment, and then you distort it even more. You use it to distort another experiment even more. To your advantage, of course. It's just, God, I hate this planet. Oakley Duke. So till the next time and such.